Maria Rodriguez lived in a small, quiet neighborhood where life moved at its own pace. Her home was modest, a cozy apartment above a bakery that filled the air with the scent of freshly baked bread every morning. Despite their humble surroundings, Maria's family was rich in love and values. Her father, Juan, worked long hours as the school janitor. He spent his days mopping floors, fixing broken desks, and making sure the classrooms were tidy for students to learn in. To most people, Juan was just the janitor, but to Maria, he was her hero, a man who worked tirelessly to give her the best life possible. Maria was different from other kids her age. While many of her classmates complained about homework or rushed through assignments, Maria soaked up every bit of knowledge she could find. She loved learning, not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because it made her feel alive. At school, teachers often noticed how eager she was during lessons. She raised her hand even when she wasn't entirely sure of the answer, and she stayed after class to ask questions. But instead of being encouraged, Maria faced subtle dismissals. Some teachers assumed she wouldn't go far in life, given her background. After all, what could someone like her possibly achieve? One day, during music class, something happened that would change Maria's life forever. The teacher announced they were introducing a new activity: playing musical instruments. Most students groaned, uninterested in anything beyond pop songs on their phones. When the teacher handed out violins, there were murmurs of confusion and complaints. "This is boring," one student said loudly. Another chimed in, "Who even plays violin anymore?" Sensing an opportunity to lighten the mood, a group of teachers joked among themselves, suggesting Maria should try it. Maybe she'll discover a hidden talent. One of them teased, chuckling. The comment stung. Maria felt her cheeks flush as laughter rippled through the room. Though no one meant real harm, the implication was clear. They didn't think she had what it took to succeed at something as refined as playing the violin. For a moment, Maria considered shrugging it off and joining in the laughter, pretending it didn't bother her. But deep down, something stirred inside her, a mix of hurt and determination. Why shouldn't she try? What did she have to lose? That night, Maria lay awake thinking about the violin. She imagined holding it, drawing the bow across its strings, creating music that could silence doubters. It sounded impossible, after all. She'd never touched a musical instrument before, but the idea wouldn't leave her mind. The next morning, she mustered the courage to ask her father if she could borrow the old dusty violin stored in the school's supply closet. Juan hesitated at first, unsure why his daughter wanted such a thing. But seeing the spark in her eyes, he agreed. "If this is what you want, Mija," he said softly, "then I'll support you." When Maria brought the violin home, it looked more like a relic than an instrument. Its surface was scratched, and one of the strings was missing. But Maria didn't care. She cleaned it carefully, piecing it back together with duct tape and hope. That evening, she sat cross-legged on the floor, watching YouTube tutorials on how to hold the bow and position her fingers. Every note she attempted sounded terrible at first, screechy and uneven. But Maria refused to give up. She practiced late into the night, her hands trembling with effort. The neighbors might have thought it strange, hearing those awkward sounds drifting through the walls. But Maria didn't mind. This was her chance to prove not just to others, but to herself, that she was capable of more than anyone expected. Little did she know, this decision would set her on a path no one could have predicted. Maria's journey with the violin began in a tiny corner of her apartment, where she practiced late into the night. The old battered instrument felt foreign in her hands at first. Her fingers fumbled on the strings, and the sounds that came out were far from music, more like the screech of a cat caught in a fence. But Maria didn't let that discourage her. She reminded herself of the laughter in the classroom, the jokes made at her expense, and the doubt in people's eyes. Every time she hit a wrong note, she saw it not as failure, but as a step closer to proving them wrong. Her father, Juan, watched quietly from the sidelines. He didn't know much about violins or music, but he admired his daughter's determination. One evening, as Maria struggled to play a simple scale, Juan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're doing something no one else thought you could," he said with a proud smile. "That's already a victory." His words gave Maria strength, reminding her that this wasn't just about learning an instrument, it was about showing the world what she was capable of. Maria spent hours each day practicing. During school breaks, she'd retreat to empty classrooms, using the quiet space to focus without distractions. At home, she balanced her studies with her newfound passion, often staying up until her eyelids drooped with exhaustion. Her fingertips became calloused from pressing against the strings, and her arms ached from holding the bow steady. Yet, with every passing day, the screeches turned into notes, and the notes began to form melodies. Slowly but surely, Maria started to hear something beautiful coming from the violin, a sound that filled her heart with pride. One afternoon, Maria decided to search for online tutorials to improve her technique. She discovered videos of famous violinists performing breathtaking pieces. Their movements were fluid, their expressions intense, and their music seemed to tell stories without words. Inspired, Maria tried mimicking their techniques. She learned how to hold the bow correctly, how to position her fingers on the fretboard, and how to control the pressure needed to create smooth, clear tones. It wasn't easy, but Maria embraced the challenge. Each small improvement fueled her motivation to keep going. As weeks turned into months, Maria's confidence grew. She no longer flinched when she hit a sour note. Instead, she saw it as part of the process. Her best friend, Sophia, noticed the change in her. "You've been practicing a lot lately," Sophia remarked one day after hearing Maria play a short tune. "It actually sounds really good." Encouraged by the compliment, Maria shyly admitted that she wanted to perform in front of others someday. "Maybe at the talent show," Sophia suggested excitedly. The idea had never crossed Maria's mind before, but now it planted a seed of possibility. Still, doubts lingered in Maria's mind. What if she embarrassed herself? What if the same teachers who had laughed at her watched her stumble on stage? These fears weighed heavily on her, but they also pushed her to work harder. She reminded herself why she had started this journey, to prove that she was more than what others assumed. With renewed resolve, Maria set her sights on the upcoming school talent show. She chose a piece to perform, Vivaldi's Spring, a lively and uplifting composition that resonated with her spirit. Though nervous, she poured her heart into practicing, determined to make the performance unforgettable. Meanwhile, whispers about Maria's dedication began to spread among her classmates. Some were curious, wondering why she spent so much time with the violin. Others teased her, saying things like, "Are you still trying to be a musician?" But Maria ignored the negativity. She knew the truth, that she was building something special, something that would silence the doubters once and for all. As the date of the talent show approached, Maria felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She wasn't sure how people would react, but one thing was certain: she was ready to step onto that stage and show them who she truly was. The night before the talent show, Maria sat alone in her room, cradling the violin in her lap. She ran her fingers over its worn surface, remembering how far she'd come since that first awkward attempt. Tomorrow, she would face the same people who had underestimated her. And when she did, she wouldn't just play music, she would play with her soul. Years passed, and Maria's name became synonymous with excellence in the world of classical music. From performing on prestigious stages to collaborating with renowned orchestras, she carved out a career that defied every expectation placed upon her. Her concerts were not just displays of technical brilliance, but emotional journeys that left audiences breathless. Critics hailed her as one of the most compelling violinists of her generation, praising her ability to make even the oldest compositions feel alive and relevant. Yet, despite her growing fame, Maria remained grounded, always remembering the struggles that shaped her path. Maria never forgot her roots. Every chance she got, she returned to her hometown, bringing with her the stories of her journey. She visited schools, community centers, and even the old apartment building where she had spent countless nights practicing on her battered violin. During these visits, she spoke openly about the challenges she faced, the mockery, the self-doubt, and the moments when giving up seemed like the easiest choice. "But I didn't give up," she would say, her voice steady and warm. "And neither should you." One of Maria's proudest accomplishments was starting a foundation dedicated to providing free music education for underprivileged children. The program offered instruments, lessons, and mentorship to kids who might otherwise never have access to such opportunities. Many of these children reminded Maria of herself, young dreamers eager to learn but held back by circumstances beyond their control. Watching them pick up violins for the first time filled her with hope, knowing she was helping create paths they could follow to brighter futures. Her father, Juan, watched all of this unfold with quiet pride. Though he still worked as a janitor at the school, his role felt different now. People treated him with newfound respect, often stopping to thank him for raising such an extraordinary daughter. "It wasn't me, it was her," Juan would reply humbly, beaming whenever Maria's name came up in conversation. On special occasions, he attended her performances, sitting in the front row with tears in his eyes as the audience erupted into applause. For Juan, seeing his daughter succeed was more than just personal triumph. It was proof that love and hard work could overcome any obstacle. Maria also made it a point to reconnect with those who had doubted her along the way. When she performed at her alma mater years later, several former teachers sat in the audience, visibly moved by her artistry. Afterward, one of them approached her backstage, tears streaming down their face. "Maria, we were wrong about you," they admitted softly. "You've shown us what true determination looks like." Maria smiled gently, choosing forgiveness over resentment. "Thank you for being honest," she replied. "I wouldn't be here without the challenges I faced. They taught me how to fight for my dreams." As Maria's career continued to flourish, she used her platform to advocate for change. In interviews, she spoke passionately about breaking stereotypes and creating equal opportunities for aspiring musicians from all walks of life. "Talent has no boundaries," she often said. "It doesn't matter where you come from or what people think of you. What matters is how hard you're willing to work and how much you believe in yourself." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring countless young artists to pursue their passions despite the odds. In quieter moments, Maria reflected on her journey. She thought about the laughter in the classroom, the late-night practices, and the sacrifices her family made to support her dreams. Each memory reinforced her belief that success wasn't just about reaching goals. It was about using your achievements to uplift others. Whether through her foundation, her performances, or simply sharing her story, Maria ensured that her legacy would be one of hope and resilience. Today, Maria stands as living proof that barriers can be broken, not just for herself, but for anyone willing to persevere. Her violin, once dismissed as a joke, became a symbol of triumph, a reminder that even the harshest criticism can fuel greatness if met with courage and determination. And though her journey began in a small neighborhood with modest beginnings, its impact reached far beyond, touching lives across the globe. Maria's story isn't just hers. It belongs to everyone brave enough to chase their dreams, proving that no matter where you start, the music within you can lead to extraordinary places. Maria's success at the regional competition marked a turning point in her life. Word of her performance spread quickly, not just within her school but throughout the community. Local newspapers ran stories about the janitor's daughter who defied expectations, and soon, Maria became a symbol of hope for others facing similar challenges. Her name appeared on bulletin boards, and strangers began approaching her family to express their admiration. For Juan, Maria's father, this newfound recognition was bittersweet. He had always known his daughter was special, but seeing the world finally acknowledge her talent filled him with both pride and relief. Encouraged by her progress, Ms. Thompson urged Maria to aim higher. "You're ready for bigger stages," she said one afternoon during practice. "There are scholarships out there, opportunities that could change your life." The idea seemed far-fetched to Maria at first. Scholarships were for students from elite schools, weren't they? Surely, someone like her wouldn't stand a chance. But Miss Thompson refused to let her doubts take root. She spent hours helping Maria prepare audition pieces, fine-tuning every detail until her playing sparkled with precision and emotion. With trembling hands, Maria submitted applications to several prestigious conservatories. Each form felt like a leap of faith, a gamble that the judges would see beyond her modest background and recognize her potential. As weeks passed, the wait became agonizing. Every envelope that arrived in the mail made her heart race, only to reveal rejection letters. Doubt crept back in, whispering cruel reminders of how different she was from other applicants. But then, one day, an acceptance letter arrived. The envelope was thick and official-looking, bearing the logo of a renowned music conservatory. Maria opened it with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the words over and over again. "We are pleased to offer you a full scholarship." Tears streamed down her face as she read the letter aloud to her father. Juan hugged her tightly, his voice choked with emotion. "You did it, Mija," he murmured. "This is your dream coming true." News of Maria's acceptance sent ripples through her hometown. Teachers who had once underestimated her now spoke of her achievements with pride, though some still struggled to admit their past skepticism. At school, students gathered around her, asking how she managed to secure such a remarkable opportunity. Maria answered humbly, crediting her hard work, her mentor, and her family's unwavering support. She didn't hold grudges. Instead, she used her story to inspire others. "If I can do it," she told them, "so can you. Don't let anyone tell you what you're capable of." As graduation approached, Maria prepared for her final performance at the school, a moment that carried deep significance. Standing on stage in a borrowed gown, she played a hauntingly beautiful rendition of Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings. The piece swelled with emotion, capturing the highs and lows of her journey, the laughter, the struggles, the triumphs. When the final note faded, the auditorium erupted into applause. This time, there were no whispers or doubts, only admiration. Afterward, one of the teachers who had mocked her during music class approached her with visible remorse. "Maria," he began hesitantly, "I owe you an apology. We didn't see your potential, and we should have. You've shown us all what perseverance really looks like." Maria met his gaze calmly, her expression softening. "Thank you," she replied simply. "But I hope you'll remember this moment when you meet other students like me. Everyone deserves a chance to shine." Maria's departure for conservatory marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Before leaving, she visited Miss Thompson to thank her for everything. "You believed in me when no one else did," Maria said, her voice thick with gratitude. "I'll never forget that." Miss Thompson smiled, brushing away a tear. "It wasn't my belief that got you here. It was yours. Remember that, no matter where life takes you." As Maria boarded the train to her new life, she looked out the window at the familiar streets of her neighborhood. She thought about the long nights practicing in empty classrooms, the doubters who had underestimated her, and the mentors who had lifted her up. Though nervous about the challenges ahead, she felt ready. After all, she had already proven that barriers could be broken, not just for herself, but for anyone willing to fight for their dreams. The day of the talent show arrived, and the school auditorium buzzed with excitement. Students chattered loudly as they filed into their seats, eager to see what their classmates had prepared. Backstage, Maria stood nervously, clutching her violin like a lifeline. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. She glanced around at the other performers. Some were practicing dance moves, others tuning guitars or adjusting costumes. Everyone seemed confident, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong there. Sophia, her best friend, noticed Maria's unease and gave her an encouraging smile. "You've got this," Sophia whispered, squeezing her hand. "Just close your eyes and play like you always do." Maria nodded, trying to steady her breathing. She reminded herself of all the hours she'd spent practicing, the blisters on her fingers, and the nights when she stayed up late perfecting even the smallest details. This was her moment to shine, no matter what anyone thought. When the host called Maria's name, a hush fell over the audience. Whispers rippled through the crowd as people turned to look at her. Some recognized her as the janitor's daughter. Others remembered the jokes made about her during music class. A few snickers echoed from the back rows, but Maria blocked them out. Taking a deep breath, she walked onto the stage, her footsteps echoing softly against the wooden floor. The spotlight felt warm on her skin, and for a brief second, she froze, overwhelmed by the sea of faces staring back at her. But then, Maria closed her eyes. She focused on the weight of the violin resting under her chin and the cool smoothness of the bow in her hand. Slowly, she began to play. The first notes of Vivaldi's Spring filled the room, hesitant at first, but quickly gaining strength. As the melody unfolded, something magical happened. The murmurs in the audience faded, replaced by stunned silence. Maria's playing wasn't flawless. Years of professional training would have polished her technique further. But what she lacked in perfection, she more than made up for with raw emotion. Every note carried the weight of her struggles, her dreams, and her determination to prove herself. The audience was spellbound. Teachers who had once dismissed Maria leaned forward in their seats, their expressions shifting from skepticism to awe. Students who expected her to fail found themselves captivated by the beauty of her performance. Even Sophia, watching proudly from the front row, wiped away tears as the music swelled. For those few minutes, Maria wasn't just a girl from a working-class family or the janitor's daughter. She was a musician pouring her soul into every note. As the final chord rang out, the auditorium erupted into applause. It started tentatively, almost cautiously, before growing into thunderous cheers. People clapped and stomped their feet, some standing to give Maria a standing ovation. Maria lowered her violin, blinking in disbelief. Her cheeks flushed red, not from embarrassment this time but from pride. She scanned the crowd, locking eyes with her father, who sat beaming in the back row. His face said everything she needed to hear. "I'm so proud of you." Backstage, after the show, Maria was surrounded by well-wishers. Classmates who had barely acknowledged her before now congratulated her enthusiastically. "That was amazing," one boy exclaimed. "How did you learn to play like that?" Another student asked if she'd teach them how to hold a violin properly. Maria smiled shyly, still processing the whirlwind of attention. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Not as someone defined by her circumstances, but as a talented individual worthy of respect. Even the teachers approached her, though their praise came tinged with regret. One of them, Mrs. Harper, hesitated before speaking. "Maria," she began, her voice soft. We didn't think you'd take our jokes seriously. But tonight, you showed us all how wrong we were." Maria met her gaze steadily, her expression calm. "It wasn't easy," she admitted, "but I learned something important along the way. Sometimes people will doubt you. What matters is whether you believe in yourself." Her words lingered in the air, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. That night, as Maria packed up her violin and headed home with her father, she knew she had accomplished more than just winning over a skeptical audience. She had proven, to herself and to the world, that passion and perseverance could turn even the harshest criticism into triumph. Maria's journey at the conservatory was nothing short of a whirlwind. From the moment she stepped onto its sprawling campus, she felt both exhilarated and overwhelmed. The conservatory buzzed with energy, students practicing in every corner, professors discussing complex musical theories, and performances happening almost nightly. For someone who had taught herself to play on a battered old violin, it was a world unlike anything Maria had ever known. But instead of shrinking back, Maria embraced the challenge with the same determination that had brought her this far. At first, fitting in wasn't easy. Many of her classmates came from privileged backgrounds, having studied music since childhood under private tutors. They spoke fluently about composers and techniques Maria had only begun to explore. Some treated her with polite curiosity, while others seemed skeptical of her presence. During group rehearsals, Maria often found herself struggling to keep up with pieces that required advanced skills she hadn't yet mastered. There were moments when self-doubt crept in, whispering cruel reminders of how different she was from everyone else. But Maria refused to let those doubts define her. She threw herself into her studies with relentless focus, spending hours in practice rooms late into the night. Her fingers bled from pressing too hard against the strings, but she didn't stop until each note rang true. Professors noticed her dedication and began offering extra guidance, impressed by her hunger to learn. One professor, Dr. Ellis, pulled her aside after a particularly grueling lesson. "You have something rare, Maria," he said earnestly. "It's not just talent, it's heart. Don't lose that." Over time, Maria's hard work paid off. She began mastering challenging compositions that once seemed impossible. Her unique style, a blend of raw emotion and technical precision, set her apart from her peers. In performances, audiences were captivated by the way she poured her soul into every piece, making even the most familiar melodies feel new. Critics praised her ability to connect with listeners, saying her music told stories that resonated deeply. Slowly but surely, Maria earned the respect of her classmates and professors alike. Despite her growing success, Maria never forgot where she came from. Whenever she returned home for holidays, she visited her old school to host workshops for younger students. She shared her story openly, encouraging them to chase their dreams no matter how impossible they seemed. "I was once told I didn't belong," she told a group of wide-eyed children during one visit. "But I proved them wrong because I believed in myself." "You can too." Her words inspired many, especially kids from families like hers, who often felt overlooked or underestimated. Back at the conservatory, Maria faced one final hurdle: the senior recital. It was a rite of passage for all students, requiring them to perform a full-length concert showcasing their growth over the years. For Maria, it was an opportunity to honor her journey, the laughter, the sacrifices, and the unwavering support of her family and mentors. She chose a program filled with pieces that held personal meaning. Vivaldi's Spring, which had marked her debut at the school talent show. Barber's Adagio for strings, a tribute to her resilience, and a fiery Paganini caprice, symbolizing her triumph over doubt. On the night of the recital, the auditorium was packed with friends, professors, and even some former skeptics from her hometown. As Maria walked onto the stage, dressed in an elegant gown borrowed from a fellow student, she scanned the audience and locked eyes with her father. His proud smile gave her strength as she raised her violin and began to play. The music flowed effortlessly, carrying the weight of everything she had overcome. When the final note faded, the room erupted into thunderous applause. Tears streamed down Maria's face as she took her bow, realizing she had finally arrived. Not just as a musician, but as someone who had defied every odd stacked against her. Afterward, as people lined up to congratulate her, Maria reflected on how far she'd come. She thought about the teachers who had mocked her, the classmates who had doubted her, and the mentors who had believed in her when she needed it most. Each person had played a role in shaping her journey, teaching her lessons about perseverance, forgiveness, and the power of believing in oneself. Though her path had been difficult, Maria knew she wouldn't trade it for anything. It had made her who she was today. And now, standing on the brink of a bright future, she was ready to inspire others to follow their own dreams, no matter how daunting the road ahead might seem. Under Ms. Thompson's patient guidance, Maria's world expanded in ways she had never imagined. The retired music teacher brought decades of experience to their lessons, and her passion for teaching reignited Maria's love for the violin. Every session was a treasure trove of new discoveries. Miss Thompson introduced Maria to pieces she hadn't dared dream of playing. Complex compositions by Bach, Mozart, and Tchaikovsky that pushed her skills to their limits. But it wasn't just about learning notes. Miss Thompson taught Maria how to listen deeply, to feel the music as if it were alive, breathing through her bow and strings. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the dusty windows of the school's old practice room, Miss Thompson handed Maria a fresh sheet of music. "This one's tricky," she said with a knowing smile, "but I think you're ready." It was Paganini's Caprice No. 24, a piece so technically demanding that even seasoned musicians hesitated to tackle it. Maria stared at the page, her heart racing. The fast-paced arpeggios and intricate fingerworks seemed impossible at first glance, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, Maria felt a spark of excitement. If she could conquer this, she would prove, to herself and everyone else, that she truly belonged among the best. Maria poured her soul into mastering the caprice. Days turned into weeks as she practiced relentlessly, breaking down each section into manageable parts. Some nights, frustration bubbled over when her fingers stumbled on a particularly difficult passage. Other times, exhaustion threatened to pull her under. Yet every time she faltered, Miss Thompson reminded her why she started. "You're not just playing notes," she told Maria gently. "You're telling a story. Let the music guide you." As Maria improved, her confidence soared. She began performing small recitals for Miss Thompson and occasionally for her father, who always sat proudly in the corner clapping enthusiastically after each piece. These intimate performances gave Maria a taste of what it meant to share her gift with others. Slowly but surely, she learned to embrace the spotlight, not out of vanity, but because she wanted people to hear the stories her violin could tell. Ms. Thompson also encouraged Maria to enter regional competitions, something Maria had never considered before. At first, the idea terrified her. Competing against students from prestigious schools with years of private lessons and expensive training felt daunting. But Miss Thompson believed in her wholeheartedly. "You have something they don't," she said firmly. "Heart. Don't forget that." With trembling hands, Maria signed up for her first competition, determined to give it her all. The day of the competition arrived, and Maria found herself surrounded by talented young musicians. They carried polished instruments worth thousands of dollars, wore elegant outfits, and exuded an air of confidence that made Maria feel out of place. As she waited backstage, clutching her battered violin, self-doubt crept in. What was she doing here? Did she really belong? But then, Maria remembered Miss Thompson's words. "Heart." Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the stage, ignoring the murmurs of surprise from the audience. When she began to play, the noise faded away. Her performance wasn't flawless. There were moments where her nerves showed, but it didn't matter. The judges watched intently, captivated by the emotion in her playing. Each note carried the weight of her journey, the laughter she endured, the late-night practices, the sacrifices her family made for her dreams. When Maria finished, the auditorium erupted into applause. Though she didn't win first place, she earned second, a feat no one expected from someone with such humble beginnings. More importantly, she won something far greater: respect. Judges praised her unique style and emotional connection to the music, noting how she transformed imperfections into moments of authenticity. For the first time, Maria realized that success wasn't about being perfect, it was about being true to yourself. Afterward, as Maria stood holding her certificate, Miss Thompson approached her with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered, pulling Maria into a tight hug. "And this is only the beginning." Maria smiled, feeling a sense of belonging she had never known before. She wasn't just the janitor's daughter anymore, or even the girl who played violin as a joke. She was Maria Rodriguez, a musician whose talent and determination inspired those around her. From that moment on, Maria knew there was no limit to what she could achieve. With Miss Thompson by her side and her unwavering belief in herself, she was ready to take on the world, one breathtaking melody at a time. The days following the talent show were unlike anything Maria had ever experienced. Overnight, she went from being virtually invisible to becoming the talk of the school. Students who had barely noticed her before now greeted her in the hallways with smiles and compliments. That was incredible, one classmate said as they passed by. Another stopped her near her locker to ask if she'd ever considered joining the school orchestra. Even teachers who had once dismissed her potential seemed to view her differently. Their tones softened, their questions carried genuine interest, and some even invited her to participate in advanced music activities. But not everyone was convinced. While many praised Maria's performance, a few teachers remained skeptical. They whispered among themselves during staff meetings, questioning whether her success was a fluke or simply beginner's luck. She played well, one teacher admitted reluctantly, but let's see if she can keep it up. Others argued that without formal training, Maria wouldn't be able to compete with students from wealthier backgrounds, students who had access to private lessons, expensive instruments, and years of practice. These doubts didn't escape Maria's notice. Though no one said such things directly to her, she could sense the lingering hesitation in their eyes. Determined to prove them wrong, Maria threw herself into her practice routine with even greater intensity. She woke up earlier each morning to squeeze in extra hours before school and stayed late after classes ended, finding quiet corners where she could play undisturbed. Her fingers moved faster now, her bow strokes smoother, and her confidence grew with every passing day. But Maria knew there was still so much to learn. The piece she had performed at the talent show, while beautiful, was relatively simple compared to the complex compositions professional violinists mastered. If she wanted to take her skills to the next level, she needed guidance, something she couldn't achieve on her own. Maria began researching ways to improve. She scoured the internet for tips, watched countless tutorials, and studied recordings of famous violinists to understand their techniques. During lunch breaks, she practiced in empty classrooms, mimicking the intricate movements she saw online. Sometimes, curious students would peek inside, amazed by how effortlessly she seemed to glide through difficult passages. Yet despite her progress, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that she was hitting a wall. There were nuances in her playing that she couldn't quite grasp, a lack of polish that separated amateurs from professionals. One afternoon, while practicing in an unused corner of the gymnasium, Maria caught the attention of Miss Thompson, a retired music teacher who volunteered at the school. Miss Thompson had been sorting sheet music when the faint strains of melody drifted toward her. Intrigued, she followed the sound until she found Maria, standing alone with her violin, completely absorbed in her playing. For several minutes, Miss Thompson listened silently, marveling at the passion in Maria's performance. When the final note faded, she stepped forward and introduced herself. "Maria, is it?" Miss Thompson asked warmly. "That was beautiful. Where did you learn to play like that?" Maria blushed, explaining how she had taught herself using online resources and sheer determination. Impressed by her story, Miss Thompson offered to help. "You have real talent," she said firmly. "But talent needs nurturing. Let me teach you what I know. It won't cost you a thing." Maria's eyes widened with gratitude. She had dreamed of having a mentor, but never imagined it would happen this way. With Ms. Thompson's guidance, Maria's growth accelerated. The retired teacher introduced her to new pieces, corrected subtle mistakes in her technique, and taught her how to interpret the emotions behind the music. Under her watchful eye, Maria learned to control her bow pressure, shift between notes seamlessly, and add expressive vibrato to her playing. Each lesson left her more inspired than the last. For the first time, Maria realized that she wasn't alone in her journey. Someone believed in her enough to help her reach higher heights. As weeks turned into months, Maria's transformation became undeniable. Her performances gained depth and maturity, capturing not just the notes but the soul of the music itself. Even those who had doubted her initially began to acknowledge her hard work and dedication. One teacher, Mr. Collins, approached her after hearing her rehearse a challenging sonata. "I'll admit I underestimated you," he confessed. "But watching you now, I can see how much heart you put into this. Keep going. You're proving all of us wrong." Maria smiled, accepting the compliment graciously. She didn't hold grudges. Instead, she used their doubts as fuel to push herself further. Every obstacle, every challenge, only.